Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you once again for another episode, another weekly episode of the 247 Real Talk podcast. It is about 10:30 p.m. on Wednesday, October 2nd, as I look at the clock behind my camera. And as I said, it's a pleasure to be here with you. It's been an eventful week in many ways. I thank you for joining me. I'm going to start off by dealing with giving you an update on my health. Um, so last time we spoke, I was awaiting, I'm not sure if I told you or not. Maybe I did, but I have surgery scheduled for October 29th. Pre-surgery scheduled next week. Have to go through some prerequisites of uh, CT scan of my knee and getting a bit of a runaround in the healthcare industry. It's really strange how all of these industries, the radiology places that do the CT scans and the surgeons and the surgeons' offices that do the surgery make a ton of money from insurance, and yet when it comes to working through the simple prerequisites, rather than make it easy for the patient, they have the patient bouncing back between one facility and the other, where everybody's claiming it's not their job to get to the finish line. But for me, I have to get this done. I'm not looking forward to the pain. I heard knee replacement surgery is quite painful, but I'm going to keep my chin up. I'm going to keep being optimistic. And I'm going to look forward to what comes after, where I can do all the things I want to do with my kids, with enjoying nature and myself without pain. Um, so that's enough about me and my update. I will keep you informed. I'll be recording, new episodes for at least another 2 weeks, and then I'll let you know when we'll go into a few replays, probably scheduled out for maybe 6 weeks after that. I hope you'll remain my supporters and my loyal listeners during that time, and I'll try to program some very interesting programming from past episodes, so I'll keep you engaged and occupied until I return live on the show. So I'm going to touch on just a few other things on this episode, including the vice presidential debate from last night. I'll tell you my thoughts about that and actually what happened and how I ended up listening to part of it uh, as soon as I return. I'll be right back. So I'm back, and I hope you can hear me clearly. I keep fudging around with this mic. This is the one of choice for now. I have several that I tried. I seem to like the sound of this one. Anyway, moving right into it. So I had no intention, after watching the presidential debate, after watching uh, what any intellectual would say, if you're being honest, is um, it was a lopsided debate in terms of the ability of Kamala Harris, who had been a previous prosecutor, to articulate versus ex-President Donald Trump, who simply doesn't have that ability. But anyway, so last night I told my wife, I said, no, I'm not watching it. I went into bed and I lay down, I put on my headphones, but she was watching it. And I think what first caught me was facial expressions, and so I kind of turned my volume up and down and listened to certain parts of it. So here's my takeaway. We know that, well, for me at least, I never knew much about Vance and Walz prior to them becoming vice presidential candidates. What I got out of seeing them and watching that debate, or at least half of it, was on the side of Vance, what I could see was he was definitely making an effort to come over as a nice guy. Whether it was seen as truthful or not, sincere or not, leave that to voters, right? But he was definitely trying to actually be the opposite of his running mate. He was trying to be personable and more human than his running mate. What I saw with Walz was a real human being. I don't know the man personally. I don't know what he stands for. I don't know if he was lying in my face or not, but how he came across was a genuine human being. It was kind of hard. No, I think anyone, even if you're a Republican and you listen to that debate and you had 1 ounce of humanity in you, I think it would have been difficult to not gravitate towards him, not feel a sincerity in his disposition and his presentation. A big deal was made after about him fumbling about Tiananmen Square, something that happened 35 years ago. And he probably didn't handle that properly. But it's amazing how we try to pick apart these debates, and when you're biased, how lopsided you see things. I love it that I'm independent. I love it that I will go after both candidates. I don't care who you are. But what I saw last night was difficulty focusing on the little things that Walz got wrong, when I was looking forward to Vance being honest and answering some questions directly, especially since, to me, he had an opportunity to bolster his ticket rather than stand with his running mate. And I guess, don't get me wrong, he had to do that. That's his running mate, right? But you have to have answers. It just seems like every question they asked, Walz had an answer. And it's understandable as a governor or someone from Minnesota, where he's had so much exposure and knowledge. I don't think Vance has the history. Vance certainly doesn't have the years in. And so it would be a good assumption that Walz is more experienced. Not because you're Republican or because you're Democrat, but because you're logical. Because if I've been doing a job for 30 years and you stepped into it and you'll be doing it for 5, then the tendency was, unless I was asleep the entire time, that I have more knowledge, more expertise, and more understanding of the playing field than you do. I was a little upset with Walz for not calling out Vance on a couple of things. This idea that immigrants were causing Americans not to be able to take advantage of the housing market. This constant beratement of immigrants. Who are these people? I mean, whether you believe Christopher Columbus or not, that's a different conversation. The point is, none of us were here before. We are all descendants of immigrants. And for those who want to stand here and talk about this great nation of America, then the fact that you could stand here and talk about your participation in this great nation of America means that you are acknowledging immigration, means that you are honoring and giving value and credence to immigration, because you wouldn't be here without migrants of that time, however they got here. So to harp on this immigration issue, to me, is an insult to the American people, whether you're Republican or Democrat. I think that one of the things that stuck out to me, and again, I can't pick apart every point, and don't be upset with me if I miss points, because I did not listen to every single question. I am being honest and upfront about that, and I was when I started this conversation, this podcast. But there's also this thing that Donald Trump said during his debate with Kamala Harris, and Vance seemed to ride on his Obamacare when they were asked about it. The Affordable American Care Act, we call it Affordable Care Act, we call it Obamacare. All I heard Trump say during his debate with Kamala Harris was they have concepts, and he basically acknowledged that their concepts didn't work, so he had to keep Obamacare, and what they have is new concepts, and they're going to change, and they're going to get rid of Obamacare if they get into office again. because of these concepts. And I wanted someone to say to him, well, if you had a concept when you were president, you've had 3 years to develop the concept, and now you want to go back to the White House with a concept. Didn't anything come out of these 3 years of working on the concept so that it's more tangible than just a concept? The other thing that and everybody knows, and I said before my episodes, I am a firearm instructor. I go to the range. I have many licenses, although I've given up a few of them recently in terms of credentials in different law enforcement areas, we would call it. When I say that, let me be clear, certifications as armed guards and things like that. And, you know, what is logical to me is to bring up the fact that whenever the conversation has started, I've often said to a friend of mine, a good listener of this show, when we debate gun control, I've often said that for us to get to anywhere, any progress, both sides have to acknowledge the feelings of the other side and try to meet somewhere in the middle. You're not going to be perfect, but you've got to make some sort of progress, because the shooting of kids, the shootings in schools, the number of guns are being taken away from kids going into school, it's just not right. And I am a firearm owner. I am a licensed firearm owner. I am someone who is who believes in that right. Whether you do it as a sport, you feel that you need it for your protection, you do it legally, you go through the legal process. In New York, you go through a mental health certification, and you practice good gun safety. You make sure you have a formula of a safe at home, not only to protect your family members and kids from getting into it, but also protect if an intruder ever got into your home. You do all the right things. And then you make sure that criminals can't buy them. That's a conversation that Democrats and Republicans need to have. But there's so much pain and anger and divisiveness here that they won't even talk on a level playing field. So when Vance wants to come out and talk about, people want to take away your guns, they've got the public believing these lies, and I'm sorry. As a gun owner and someone who believes in that right, I have not seen any evidence that that Democrats want to take away your guns. I've seen evidence where lawmakers, especially anti-gun lawmakers, which happens to fall in the Democrats here because of the political relationship, do things like go into Congress and pick up an AR-15 and raise it in the air and say assault weapon. Well, it may look like an assault weapon. It may be. I'm sorry, I might have a lot of alarms going off. It may look like an AR-15 or an M16. Well, it is an AR-15, but the point, it may look like an M16, it may look like an assault weapon, but the format is as such. But the civilians are not walking around with assault weapons unless they're walking around in something illegal that they modified. Many of these so-called assault weapons that they raise up in Congress are rifles that shoot one round at a time. It's a semi-automatic rifle. I'm not going to get into the details of that because I don't want to sidetrack this conversation. My point is that when you're going to have debates and you're going to be that misleading, and then you have the people in the press who opine after the debate, and you can say even they are partisan. The American people can never get to a level playing field where the decision is made on what we believe that people can achieve via policy and their ideologies of pro-life ideology. When I say pro-life now, I'm not talking about the abortion issue at this moment. I mean pro-life. I mean pro-American citizens, pro most of us in America living a better life. When it came to the abortion issue, we already know from the debate between Trump and Harris that there was a big discrepancy between Vance and Trump, where Vance talked about, I believe, about Trump banning it nationwide as a federal law, and Trump saying, no, that's not true. And then Trump said he and Vance never discussed it. Again, what a slap in the face of all Americans, Democrat or Republican. There are a few big issues that are the top of this election, and abortion is one of them. And President Trump would have us believe that he went through a candidate selection, that he went through vetting multiple people until he chose J.D. Vance, and he never asked him about it, never discussed your position on abortion? Is that what you think of the intellect of your supporters, Mr. Trump? And then you've got this poor man, J.D. Vance, having to stick to this rhetoric. And then there was the damning moment of last night. Now, I'm going to say this. We have people who lie to themselves to believe, people who lie to themselves because they want their truth to be something they can live with, even if it means swallowing a whole lot of guilt. We all know what happened on January 6th. I have met people who've said to me January 6th was a hoax that never happened. Tell that to the 140 police officers who were injured that day. Tell them to those who died that day that it was a hoax that it never happened. I had someone look at me in my face and say it never happened. Tell everyone that all the TV channels that were showing what was going on was all an orchestrated hoax on the American people. Tell intelligent people, even impartial, even news outlets that are completely foreign were broadcasting what was going on. And then we've had years of President Trump claiming that there was widespread fraud. Now remember, there was a difference of somewhere between, I don't know the number, so forgive me, I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere between 5 and 8 million votes that President Biden won by. And President Trump said there's widespread fraud and that President Biden did not win the election. Here we are on possibly the one and only vice presidential debate where I don't think it changed a lot of minds, let me say that debate, but it should have. Here we are where there's a possibility this is the only vice president debate. Here we are considering that what happened with President Biden, where he stepped aside for Kamala Harris, that the vice president represents the role of president when the president is away or unable to act in that role. And Vice Presidential candidate Walz asked Vance, would you say that President Biden, I think I'm not doing the exact word, but would you basically say that President Biden won the election? If your takeaway from the night, whatever you took away, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, independent, whatever, if that was not the most stunning moment of clear evidence of deception, of clear evidence of a man in Vance who would sell his soul because he couldn't speak the truth. I'm sorry. I understand that you're running an election. I understand that the goal is to win. But as an American citizen, I also understand that I need to see the ability in you to be humane and the ability in you to be honest. We are 3 years going into the Biden presidency. The answer that you could have come up with was, well, he's got the job, so I guess the American people thought he did something, some answer. What J.D. Vance did when asked that question was to completely deflect to, would he go to energy or some? I mean, he just simply declined to answer the question in front of the millions of Americans and millions of people around the world. If anyone believes for a moment that I'm the only one who saw that, who heard that, and who is left with an impression from that, you're fooling yourself. Sir, we are 3.5 years, whatever, into the Biden presidency. Can you now say after 61 or 62 lawsuits, 61 or 62 lawsuits filed or cases filed in court, 61 or 62 judges from every different level of court telling you that you are wrong, that there is zero evidence, where President Trump says that 61 or 62 cases were dismissed from a technicality, And let's pause there for a second. Because what I heard when I follow those cases where the judges says you've brought no evidence into this court. As a matter of fact, Rudy Giuliani has been the recipient of the brunt of the what I want to say, the fallout from a lot of those cases, because he was the one who went to the court with the same rhetoric. He was the one who upset judges with the same nonsense. And President Trump kept saying, "Oh, it's a technicality." Well, he also said during his debate with Kamala Harris that when people didn't perform in his cabinet, in his staff, he fired them. So did you fire 60-something lawyers? Because you're telling me that 60-something times your so-called brilliant, highly paid lawyers went to court, and however they presented the case, there was an issue with a technicality with how they filed it 61 or 62 times. Look, I've seen interviews with people where I'm left with my mouth hanging open in awe at their inability to be sensible. I'm being very politically correct with my very selective with my words because I don't want to call anyone any names. Where basically someone says 1 and 1 is equal to 5 because President Trump said so. And President Obama, yes, they went to Obama, said 1 and 1 is equal to 2, and he's a liar because that's not true. I mean, that sounds absurd, right? But if you listen to some of the interviews, they're more absurd than the absurdity of what I'm saying. These are people who believe whatever they are told, even if their eyes and their minds and whatever they have in their heads tells them different. Even if they've never been to school and they can't read and write, we are still all born with a level of common sense, of right and wrong, of what makes sense and what doesn't. If you take, there's an old school way where, people have kids and as they're growing and they get to the height of your stove, people are always afraid of kids causing fires because they're playing with the stove. And where I come from in the Caribbean, there was a thing where parents would say, let them turn it on, let them get burned. The first time they get a burn, I'm not talking about getting hurt to go to the hospital. They're talking about ouch. The first time that happens, that baby's gonna stop doing that. Yet we got people, millions of people in this country who've heard the same nonsense, who've been victims of the same nonsense, who've been non-recipients of any benefits during the Trump administration. And yet they keep pushing their hands back to continuously get burned, which means that they have less common sense than a newborn baby or a young child. Now I know what this sounds like. Julian said he's independent and he's railing away right now on President Trump. Well, hold on. For those of you who are my regular listeners who have taken the time to embrace this podcast, you've heard me rail away on President Biden. You've heard me rail away on him at one point on immigration. You heard me really rail away at him on student loans. You heard me rail many times because I call it like I see it. And when someone's going to insult my intelligence, I'm not going to be soft-spoken to appease someone who believes that somehow a presidential candidate whom they never met, who cares nothing about them, is someone that they're willing to lay their life down for. Someone who, when they were in office, they probably got zero benefit because, let's face it, capitalism, Republican ideology for the rich. And most of those 77 million, whatever people who voted for President Trump are not rich. Most are not even middle class. So what are you getting out of it? Well, we know there's also the supremacist issue, right? But we're not going to digress to that because that's a whole different sore point for people of color, for for women, for people in the LGBTQI community, people who have experienced prejudice and racism at a level that we haven't seen since slavery. So I don't know what you got out of last night's debate. Like I said, last night's debate, I only got a few things. I didn't watch the whole thing. But I'm left with one thought from that. I think that J.D. Vance, with that one last question, destroyed any kind of credibility or any kind of or any semblance of the effort he made all night to seem honest and credible. That was his shining moment. That while he didn't have to throw his running mate under the bus, he could have used some intelligence to answer it tactfully. So we would be saying, oh, you know what? He didn't answer the question. He never really owned up to it. But it wouldn't have been such a stark avoidance of answering a question and telling the American people that you believe in democracy. If you believe in democracy, then whether you have a difference in opinion, the bottom line is that last election, like him or not, President Biden won the election. If you believe in any moment in decency and honesty, you acknowledge that January 6th was a failure of a president to act. And the fact that you're going to stand there and also say, I believe one of the points of the night was J.D. Vance, who would have been Pence, said he would not have certified the election. But you want to talk about freeness and fairness and honesty and democracy? You try to tie Kamala Harris to censorship, but you would not have certified the election? Well, Tim Walz made a point. He basically said that if Mike Pence had done what they're saying and had gone against the fabric, the tapestry of our democracy, and had followed along and not certified the election, it would be him debating Tim Walz and not J.D. Vance. Mike Pence is not there because he represents what is left of the integrity of the Republican Party. The older crew of Republicans who we had to have respect for, even if we disagree with their ideology. I had a lot of differences with Romney, with Bush, with Reagan, with Bush Sr. But like what Mike Pence did, like him or not, was he stood for democracy and he stood for what was right and wrong, even though it meant that he would lose his job. And not only did he lose his job for doing the right thing, he also lost his role as a running mate. So much so that he ran momentarily for the nomination to replace his running mate. I hate to have these political conversations because it's so difficult to get people to have them in an objective manner. But it's important because come election night this year, I won't be on the air. I can't sit here having had knee replacements 7 days before and record an episode. So I won't be able to give you my feedback the next day, and I certainly won't be able to share whatever emotions I feel that day for whoever wins. So this is my time to speak to you, to tell you to speak to others. Not who to vote for, but what to vote for. Integrity, honesty, democracy, credibility. Now, I understand when I use that word credibility, both sides would look at me because, quite frankly, if you're a politician, you don't have a whole lot of credibility. You've got to give up a lot to be a politician. But I hope that we make the right choice for America, not for a few, but for the multitude of us who are simply seeking the American dream. Once again, always my pleasure. I've come to the end of another episode. I appreciate you. I appreciate my time with you. I appreciate the continuous subscribers. I appreciate the continuous support. I appreciate those who reach out to me, and I thank you for doing so respectfully. you can do so by emailing me at podcast@247realtalk.net. We've got a few more episodes to go until I take some leave. Until then, do enjoy the rest of the week and the weekend. Please take care of yourselves and each other.